Great. Welcome to the CESLC Insider, where you can tune in and join us every other Wednesday at 12 p.m. to find education on topics that matter to you. I'm your host, Angelique Jackson, and I'm the Manager of Business Development and Marketing here at Charles E. Smith Life Communities, and I thank you for joining us today. I also just want to remind you that here at Charles E. Smith Life Communities, we deliver care and personal experiences tailored to those that we serve here on campus. We also provide a full suite of services from independent living, assisted living, care for older adults that have memory impairment, post-acute care for those older adults who have had a long hospital stay and need additional rehabilitation before returning to home, long-term care, and also outpatient primary care at our Hirsch Health Center. To learn more about our residences and schedule a tour of our campus, Robin Lerner will put in a link to our website as well as a phone number that you can call as well. So can you guys hear me now? Is it better? Can you hear us? I'm sorry about that. Do I need to speak louder? How about now? Is this better? Oh, wonderful. I'll be louder. Great. So a few reminders. This program does qualify for one Category 1 continuing education unit for social workers. So we're excited about that. So if you are a social worker and you would like a certificate after watching this program, please email Amanda Painter. Her email address will be listed in the chat. And give us about 7 to 10 business days to email your certificate. We do appreciate your patience. And it's also important that the name that you would like to appear on the certificate match the name that you use to register for the event today, and also the name that you use to log on to the event. And if you have any additional questions, please put them in the chat, and we look forward to getting to your questions today. So today, Ann Benefield, our Executive Director of Landow House and Cohen Rosen House, joins us to discuss innovative approaches to cognitive impairment and memory care. Thank you so much for joining us. We appreciate your time.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
So what drove you towards your passion for serving older adults?
So have been serving older adults for about 14 years now, and I can say it started at a very young age. When I was a child, my mother was a recreational therapist in a skilled nursing facility in California, and I would go along with her just to listen to the older adults, their stories, and kind of reminisce with them as a child. That kind of piqued my interest in the older adult population. And as I got older, I watched my grandmother take care of my grandfather in her own home as he suffered from early onset Alzheimer's disease, and watched her really have a hard time with home care not being so consistent and that kind of thing. So I really thought at that age, I want to make a difference and help older adults and their families by going into gerontology. I got my master's of science in gerontology and decided I wanted to be in the senior living world because, again, seeing my grandmother go through what she did, I know there's something better out there that can also help families and the older adults. So that's how I ended up in senior living, and here I am.
What a heartfelt story, and usually it's always something very personal and dear to us that connects us to our passion.
Right.
Thank you so much for sharing that.
You're welcome.
Can you tell us a little bit about your role as Executive Director at our 2 residences, Landow House and Cohen Rosen House?
Yeah, so I must say it is a fun job. I get to oversee the operations of assisted living and memory care and our Connections neighborhood on our 3rd floor in Landow. From the day-to-day operations of, assisting residents in the dining room or going over a care plan, to activities. Just yesterday, did resident council and they wanted me there, so I got to help with that. So really, it's a fun job because every day could be something different, and you have to come up with a creative solution as the world is changing, as well as our older adults. So,
yeah, sounds like you guys have a lot of fun over there.
we do.
Now, I noticed that you are CDP. I saw CDP after your name. Can you tell us a little bit what that means and why that's beneficial to our residents over there?
Sure. So CDP stands for Certified Dementia Practitioner. So it is a course that you take from a professional, and it's a national certification that you can get, where you go a little more in depth into dementia, the stages, the types, and then the interventions, right, and the different programming you can utilize to help those older adults in an assisted living setting, in a home setting, in a skilled nursing setting. So you can really use that anywhere. It's just another great educational tool to help with older adults that may be having some signs of dementia or different dementias diagnosed.
Okay. Oh, wow, so wonderful. So then, how is that helpful to the population over at Cohen Rosen and Landow House?
Yeah, so at Landow and Cohen Rosen, I use it probably on a daily basis, quite honestly, in our different activity groups, or even in caregiving. So it's helping to also train the caregivers with the knowledge that I have from the CDP certification to help train them in a resident that has dementia. Maybe they're not wanting to take a shower that day. So what else can we try? What other kind of interventions that we can do, or get to the root of why are they not wanting to take a shower? Is it because now they're fearful of the water? Is it too cold? Does it bring up an old memory? Did something happen in the shower? So it's getting to the root of it and then figuring out how to solve that problem.
Wow.
Yeah.
So can you give us an overview of each resident?
Sure. So Landow House is assisted living. We have 60 apartments, and they're all single, so it's just like a home-like setting. We have a large dining room where they get to come, like a restaurant-style dining, and get served and waited on, as well as we have a beauty and barber salon, and then a full range of activities and amenities in assisted living in Landow. But also in Landow, what's really cool is we have a neighborhood called Connections on our 3rd floor, so it's still in Landow. It is a secure neighborhood. So it's for those residents that are sort of between needing assisted living and memory care. So it's sort of a transition program for them. It's a lot smaller. It's only 8 apartments there. So it's very home-like. They have home-like dining style service and that kind of thing. So for someone with some memory or mild cognitive impairment, it's really beneficial because it's a smaller, less overwhelming environment and more of that personalized care. And then we have Cohen Rosen. So when there's more severe cognitive deficits, Cohen Rosen is really our memory care residence on campus. That is 18 apartments, so it's still not something large and overwhelming, but it's really tailored towards those residents that have a little more severe and need a little bit of a different activity level than Connections.
So it's safe to say that it's a very calming environment that really helps your residents feel like they're at home.
Yes, and we just use oils throughout the day, lavender, some peppermint, so we can make it very individualized. We have music, soothing music going on. We have a quiet room if someone just needs alone time in a space, those kinds of things. And the smells of baking bread and things like that as well, we do in Cohen Rosen too.
Okay, thank you so much. So you mentioned I guess I'd like for you to paint a picture of, the type of each resident, I guess, defining mild cognitive impairment.
Yeah, so really mild cognitive impairment sometimes can be in assisted living, right? Or maybe needing that Connections. And that's going to be really based on an assessment done prior to moving in. As I'm sure you all in this field know, a thorough assessment is really needed to determine where they're going to be, if it's going to be assisted living, Connections, or Cohen Rosen, and where they're going to benefit the most. We have to look at the whole approach of what that resident's needing and where they're currently at. And that may change over time. So, the assisted living resident may have some mild impairment, but still remember how to get to the dining room and not want to go out, not be exit seeking, but have some mild impairment where activities, they benefit from some different kinds of activities, but not really exit seeking at that point. Now, a Connections resident may be more exit seeking and more sundowning during that afternoon time. So they're needing a more secured, smaller environment where, again, the programming is built towards that level. where it's maybe a little bit more moderate cognitive impairment versus the mild. Then when you get to severe cognitive impairment, that's looking at Cohen-Rosen. That's a Cohen-Rosen residence where they're needing, because their cognition directly impacts also their functioning, right? So, so in Cohen-Rosen, also that care level is probably going to be a little higher because their cognition is more severe. So they're going to need that assistance probably more with the bathing and the dressing and the typical ADLs or activities of daily living. They're going to need that there because cognition directly impacts functioning, as I'm sure a lot of you know.
Yes, okay. So you mentioned a list of levels of care. Can you briefly go over some of those at each residence?
Yeah, so we have, at Cohen-Rosen and Landow and Connections, all three, we do have levels from 1 to 4. So basically a resident is assessed prior to moving in. We're doing a level of care assessment. So you have to be certified to do that. So myself and a couple other of our team members are certified to do that, to determine, and again, it's a thorough assessment. So it's really sitting with that resident. I like to go wherever they're at. So if they're in their own home, if they're at another assisted living, if they're in skilled nursing, I'll go there because I really want to see them face to face and start a conversation. And to me, it's a dialogue. We have a sheet of an assessment to do, but it's really just starting, you know, how are you doing? Like, what did you used to do?
Right.
What was your occupation? I kind of see where that goes because that's going to help me determine also where is their memory and cognition right now. And then we talk about their daily routine. You know, what do you do when you get up? What does that look like? What does lunch, breakfast, you know, what do your meals look like? What does going to bed look like? And that's really the assessment. I'm not going through, you know, asking the specific questions, but it's just tell me about your day, and we go through it. And then that determines their level of care based on their answers or what kind of care services they need. We also do our nurse does a thorough assessment as well for the clinical and medical pieces of it, which are obviously really important as well. So there's a lot of different assessments involved to make sure they're placed in the right neighborhood and the right level of care too.
So it sounds like that it's just started off with just a conversation about, you know, who they are and what their preferences are.
Yeah, and really it goes from there. I mean, we can talk about anything from you know, their children, their occupation, but it generally lends itself to their day-to-day activities anyway, because again, cognition is part of functioning on your day-to-day, right? So it generally leads to that, for sure.
Thank you so much.
Yeah.
And so you mentioned, I guess, a little bit of an assessment. So are there certain criteria that older adults must meet in order to be able to come to live at Landow House or Cohen-Rosen?
Yeah, so we are, you know, licensed by the state of Maryland as an assisted living and memory care center. So there are certain regulations and things we have to meet. So the residents have to have certain, or not have certain clinical things, such as, feeding to, you know, those kinds of things. And really be able to participate. We want them to participate too in the activities and the lifestyle at Landow and Cohen-Rosen, which is assisted living. So, but we're there for the assistance, right, and what would be needed. But there are certain restrictions, like I said, no IVs, feeding tubes, bed sores, kind of really more skilled nursing tasks that we just obviously can't accommodate at Landow and Cohen-Rosen.
So what are the benefits to one living at one of our residences versus, you know, living at home, maybe with an adult child and they've got a caregiver?
Yeah, so I think being a part of a campus, since Landow and Cohen-Rosen and Connections sits on Charles E. Smith Life Communities are part of it, I think that's a huge benefit because I know, you know, if our resident gets ill, has a, you know, falls and breaks something, God forbid, or something happens, we have the skilled nursing, we have Hebrew Home right here on campus. So it's somewhere they don't have to go far. It's very easy transition. All the medical records, everything's right here. We share that together. So that's a huge benefit that I see on our campus. We have all the amenities of the campus right at our fingertips for our residents. Also, home care can be unreliable. So there can be call-offs. Someone doesn't show up. Then what happens? If you're working, the daughter or the son working, you're going to have to take off work and come in and care for your loved one. Versus in the community, we're always going to have staff here, 24/7, nursing, CNAs, all of that. So that is also a huge benefit. And then the programming and socialization piece. So if they're at home alone, they may just have themselves, or maybe their adult child or their adult daughter. But here, at least, they have a group of their peers that they can interact with and have fun.
Right, because at home, you know, they could be in front of the TV,
Yeah.
and you really miss that social piece.
Exactly.
So we're here to talk about memory care
Woo-hoo.
and the Vcat approach.
Yes.
So, here we are, at CESLC, a Vcat Cognitive Center for Excellence. Can you briefly discuss the program?
Yeah, so the Vcat system for us has been really life-changing, I think, for our residents, in just seeing the impact. So the Vcat is a behavioral cognitive assessment tool, is what Vcat actually stands for. And it is a system that was built by Dr. Mansbach, locally here in Maryland, which is great. We have the resources very close to home.
Wow.
Yeah. So it's a system of different assessments. There's about 5 assessments that we utilize for different residents, depending on their stage of dementia. So it's an assessment tool, essentially, and then there's the scoring part of those assessments. And then there's a grouping part with the cognitive scores that come from those assessments. And then the most important, I think, and the most fun is the programming piece, right? So the piece where we actually get to implement some of these programs and activities for the residents based on their cognition. So it's not just guessing anymore, it's really having an assessment and a tool in our tool belt to help these older adults that suffer from different types of dementia. So
the assessment aids into maybe individualizing
correct
approach or
correct. Correct, it's very individualized. So because every resident is individually assessed by someone that is trained. They go through a training process with the Vcat to be able to actually administer that test with the older adults. And yeah, so it's an individual test with individual results, right? So again, I'm keeping in mind the test is that moment in time, right? So keeping in mind of all of the things that you all I'm sure know about dementia and those types of diseases is that it's very individualized. So someone could be having a good day, bad day. So we like to do the assessment every 6 months just to make sure we have a true baseline and know what's going on with the resident.
So the assessments are continual.
Mm-hmm. Oh yeah, yeah. So we do the first one and then every 6 months. But we also, if we notice a change in condition in the resident, say they go out to the hospital, return, or something drastically happens, we'll do the Vcat again just to see what that new score looks like based on where they're at today.
Wow. Oh, wonderful. Mm-hmm. So you mentioned that there were a few tests.
Mm-hmm. Yes, there's 5.
So there's,
yeah.
Can you go over briefly those assessments and why they're used and why they're important as far as determining individualized approach to programming and
Sure. And just reiterating, this test system can be used across all professionals. So in acute care settings, post-acute care, assisted living, memory care settings, and even at home, it can be administered. So just want to make sure you all are aware of that. And then anyone to administer it too needs to be trained. A lot of social workers, I know our social worker here on campus does a lot of our Vcats, as well as our memory care director does them also. So really it's just getting trained on it to perform it.
Wonderful.
So yeah, so there's actually, 6 tests. I think I said 5. There's 6 unique assessments. We primarily use what's called the Vcat SF, which is the short form, just because it's a very quick assessment, a little bit quicker than we can get a true snapshot from with our older adults. So it's, again, just a screening tool that we'll sit down and ask. It's about maybe 6 to 10 questions. It's very brief, kind of determining if they can do any verbal recall. There's a story that's told. Can they recall anything from that story? Any storytelling they can do. And then memory recall, too. So it's a very short, simple, to-the-point test. Then that is scored from there. That's the short form. Another is called the BADS. BADS, it's the Brief Anxiety and Depression Scale. We also do this with every one of our residents as well. Just because, especially during times of still COVID, we want to know if our residents are experiencing anxiety and depression, and I believe the statistic is 70% of those diagnosed with dementia do experience anxiety and depression at some point. So it's really, really important to do that test. And the point of that test is to determine, how severe is the anxiety, how severe is the depression, and what do we need to do interventions for that particular resident or older adult? Are there particular counseling sessions or psychotherapy things they need? Are there medications need to be adjusted? Things like that is good for that tool. next is a kitchen picture test of judgment. It's It's KPT for short. This is a lot used in independent living settings because it's looking at a kitchen setting, so a picture of a kitchen, where I'm sure a lot of those older adults still are using a kitchen, right? And they're looking to see if there's any safety issues in that picture, and can they point it out?
Oh.
So can they notice that, you know, there's smoke and something's burning on the stove, and would they circle that and notice that? So that's a really good test for a lot of independent living older adults, just to see if we're needing to put any interventions in place with safety awareness too.
Wow. So that really assesses how safe they are at home, and can they recognize if they're in danger.
Right.
Oh, wow.
Right. The next is VPJ, the verbal test of practice judgment. This is also sort of used a lot of more independent older adults or residents as well, because they apply some situations, so they kind of read them. There's about 10 different situations they could pick from and read, and then they have to use their judgment. So it's kind of, it could be a scenario of a problem, right? Like they see a car on the side of the road, what are they gonna do? Or they see police coming out, you know, what's gonna happen? So kind of using their judgment to see if they're gonna make the right decision in that moment. Again, it's a lot about safety, kind of goes back to that as well. But it's a scenario that they have to read to them, so it's also seeing, can they remember what they just heard too, for short-term memory purposes. So that's, and then I think I said, hopefully I'm on the last, I think I'm on the last one.
Verbal, you talked about your verbal.
And then the brief cognitive impairment scale. So this is the, I think the last one I'm going to talk about. It's an 11-item test as well to track people with more advanced and severe dementia. So this is a little more, going to be some more basic questions, but I really wouldn't use that tool. Again, it's the brief cognitive impairment scale, the BCIS. So this is if someone's scoring pretty low on the initial short form Vcat, you could then go to this to go a little more further with someone with advanced or severe dementia. Just another set of questions to go over.
Oh, so it goes a little bit deeper.
Yes.
The cognition is more, the decline is more advanced.
Correct.
So it sounds like a lot of these tests are really just trying to determine if they have any memory recall, if they have any judgment as far as safety, and then overall decision-making capabilities as well.
Right, correct. Exactly.
Thank you. Wow.
Yeah.
So then those assessments help determine.
Yeah, so then those assessments, what we do, at least at Charles E. Smith, is we, like I said, we assess everyone and we keep that on an ongoing basis and as needed as well, and every 6 months. We then kind of categorize or put our residents into some groups. So there's sort of the mild, right? There's the moderate and severe. So we have our residents kind of group based on that. So then that's helpful, because what that does is when we're doing our programming and our activities, we can cater to those specific groups. Okay. So then those residents and older adults are getting more out of the programming because it's geared literally to their cognitive abilities.
So do those, and you kind of mentioned the relationship with cognition and activities of daily living, the function of being able to perform those activities, of daily living. Does it also, so those assessments also help predict how much function they have, or how much they're able to do on their own, or how much assistance they need? Right,
that's going to definitely help with the care that they're going to need, right, in their care plan. It's going to directly flow into that. So if they're, you know, on the moderate side of the score with their cognition, we know they're probably going to need some help with, a lot of help with ADL. So there's going to be some prompting and cueing. There may be some hands-on assistance needed for getting dressed, bathing, toileting, reminders, or they may need actual assistance in you guiding them on those tasks as well. Yeah.
And so does it, do the interventions after the assessments have been made, do the interventions help maintain what function that they have? Is there any improvement?
Yeah, so what we're seeing, we do, so from the care side, cognition directly impacts function, right? So if cognition is improving or even staying the same is okay, honestly. Okay. You know, it's going to directly impact the function, stay the same or improve. So we're noticing with our programming piece of it that we're doing twice a week here in Landow and Cohen-Rosen, we're noticing the improvement on the social side too of residents. So a lot of residents that were quiet, didn't come to activities, are really enjoying these groups because now they're amongst their peers cognitively wise, right? So they can really engage more meaningful because they're, again, amongst their exact peers, where they can engage, and we're having a resident now that she was totally quiet, and she's now making jokes, and coming out of her shell. So, and in turn with that too, she's now able to pick out her clothes better, versus us having to literally pick out her clothes for her in the morning. She can go through and decide between this sweater or this sweater now. It's not so overwhelming. So it's interesting to see the progression of this, with, like I said, the cognition piece, the socialization piece, to the ADL and the functional piece even.
And even, it sounds alleviating some of the anxiety and depression that we see with dementia that you had mentioned earlier.
True. So you would hope that those scores of that badge, that behavioral anxiety and depression, you would hope that that would coincide together then, exactly.
That's wonderful.
Yeah.
So when you do, let's say that you have, and I just have a question, let's say you have a resident who's been there for a while, you've already assessed them, now it's 6 months later, you're you're reassessing their cognition, and you notice a decline. How do you handle this situation?
Yeah, so we would obviously reassess, like you said, we would do the reassessment of them, to see now where they're at, right? And then this may need, we need to adjust the care plan, right? We need to adjust also their activity programming. We need to bring in the family. So we're gonna loop in and have a care plan conference with all disciplines involved. So we have our social worker, we have activities, we have the clinical piece, the nursing piece, dining even. We do this anyway every 6 months. But if we notice a change in condition, we're gonna immediately do that again, just to make sure we're getting every piece, from dining to the cognition to the Vcat and everything, for sure.
So it's bringing everybody together to go over, I guess, the big picture of that resident's overall functional status and kind of trying to determine where they really are now.
Yes, and it's going to start with their cognition, right? So, because that's going to impact every area, from dining to their care to their socialization, every piece of it. So I think it's really important that what the Vcat does is it lets us have a starting point to be able to start there, which can then impact the whole resident, because they're made up of, there's a spiritual, emotional, physical, the whole piece we want to be impacting for sure.
And dining can let you know how much they've been eating. If there's a decline, you can see if they've lost weight.
Are they remembering to pick up the fork? Do they know what the fork is still for? That kind of thing. Yeah.
So when you have determined there is a decline has taken place, how do you you discussed all of the amenities, and we talked about all the suite or the realm of services. How do you transition to a setting that does provide extra care?
Yeah, so again, that's going to be during those care conference meetings, we're going to be discussing that. So, and I like to, it's not just, we're going to talk about it once, and then they're going to move from Landow assisted living to connections. It's going to be an ongoing conversation where everyone's involved, because it needs to be the right decision for everyone, and everyone has to agree, that it is the best choice. So it's going to be not just a one and done kind of a care conference. It's going to be, we're going to be discussing it. We're going to go tour that neighborhood. We're going to go see what's happening there, talk to the activity staff, talk to the memory care director if it's going to Cohen-Rosen, and see what residents are doing in those different, in Cohen-Rosen connections and Landow. And then we're going to make the transition, And I think also our staff are very good at knowing when someone's new to the connections or to Cohen-Rosen, making sure they have that transition period and that grace to have that, because there may have some behaviors may evolve from that because it's a new environment, right? Think about you and me. If we got just thrown into somewhere else, or we had to go transition and move somewhere, we're going to be a little thrown off of our routine. So the staff is really geared for that, to know that that may happen, and we need to be able to be ready for that.
So you do provide some additional support, because we know that folks with cognitive impairments can be really confused when you change environment. So that's nice to know that you are thinking proactively for that. So I know we want to get to questions, but I just have a few other things that I want to discuss. I want to ask. We talked about transitioning, and then you did talk about an assessment. We spoke about behaviors. What are some of the reasons that folks that do have cognitive impairments experience behaviors?
Yeah, so I think there can be a lot of frustration, right? I think especially in that sort of middle stage, which is the longest stage, can be very frustrating because you could know that you're losing some of those independent abilities that you had previously. So it can be a scary time, right? And I think also, not remembering where you put something, a byproduct of that could be anger because you don't remember where you put it. So then there could be a lashing out at staff or lashing out at family members or accusatory comments too, like it was stolen, or because they're forgetting where they left their daily objects, right? So I think behaviors can stem from that. There's always a root, right? There's always a root cause to that behavior. Right. And it's our job, I think, as healthcare professionals, really all of us, to get to that root and to know who they were before the dementia started, who they currently are still, right? And get to that root, because it's not, medication is not always the answer. It could be the water was just too cold for the shower, right. And we just need to, maybe we need to have a diffuser in there. Maybe it needs to be a little more warm and inviting, because if they forgot what that is, it's going to be very scary to someone that might not remember what a shower is, what that is anymore. So,
right.
Yeah.
So it's just doing an extra investigation.
For sure.
And just trying to figure out what they're communicating.
Right, because also then in the late stages, then you lose some of the communication skills, right? So you may not even get that part of it anymore. So you're going to really need to know the history of that resident or that older adult to know what may be causing them pain. Or because sometimes, again, if they're yelling out, and maybe they are really in pain and they can't voice or show you anymore where it's at, because again, movement is also harder in later stages. So you may have to be a really good investigator and use your team and resources around you. It takes all of us. I know at Landow and Cohen-Rosen, we're all a team. So it's relying on those CNAs and GNAs who probably know the residents the best, and asking them. Yeah.
Decoding. We should have a whole segment on decoding behaviors. Because you mentioned sundowning too. Can you tell us a little bit about what that means?
Yeah. So generally, some people may have it even all day, I've noticed, but
really?
it can happen, when they're confused. So it's around 3, 4, 5, the sun is literally going down. So it's, what's happening? So at one point the sun was up and it was day and it was sunny, and now it's not. So that can be a very confusing, there's a whole circadian rhythm studies and things about that as well. But when the sun is literally going down, it's kind of, what do I do next? So we see a lot of residents get very agitated, not know what to do. So that's a great time for this Vcat programming to come into play. So maybe it's before dinner, maybe something after dinner, where you can do with them, so that can kind of get them redirected to, let's talk about this author, or let's talk about this picture in our MemPic book, or let's reminisce about what they used to do, or their children. So that's a great time, I think, for Vcat programming.
So you think maybe sundowning might be part of this anxiety that we were speaking about, maybe with the transition of, being kind of confused, of maybe seeing the shadows and thinking that it's evening, and then just
right.
Really
kind of what goes
redirecting.
next,
Right.
What's going to happen next now that the sun is down? Like, it's a different. It can be very confusing.
Wonderful.
Yeah.
So Vcat really gives you the tools to help meet those needs. What the behaviors are trying to tell you.
Right, because you can also, with the Vcat, go one-on-one with an older adult or your residents. You can take some of the materials from Vcat and sit down with them, and it doesn't have to be a group setting. You can do that impromptu. So if a resident is, maybe pacing and having one of those days, you can kind of try some of these different tools just with that one older adult.
Right.
And we don't have to have a big group to even do it. So.
Okay. Yeah. And then you did already mention, we kind of mentioned engagement. I mean, I think that's kind of one of the cornerstones of what makes us such a vibrant community. Would you be able to talk about the kind of tools that the Vcat offers to help integrate into the engagement program in the community?
Yeah, sure, for sure. So like I said, we fully use the Vcat at Landow and Cohen-Rosen, and just really love it, and are seeing the results in our residents as far as their engagement and socialization and expressing more too. So even some that cannot verbally express, there's more expressions that they have on their face. So some of the different tools is the working memory exercise book, which I actually brought with me here. So it's a great tool that has many different exercises in it. Again, this is where you sit down sort of one-on-one with that resident or older adult and go over it, and just start talking about, you know, looking at some pictures. What, you know, what does this remind you of? Or what is this from your childhood? And they talk, this is a couch. Well, the conversation may then go on to, you know, we bought our first couch, or my couch looked like this, had flowers on it, or whatever. It may go in a whole nother direction, but that's great. Like, that's good, because that's still getting them to have some of that recall and some of that judgment, and some of those kinds of things coming out as well. So that's one tool. Another is, so there's one for professionals, and then there's the home edition that we use with our staff one-on-one as well. Another tool is the MemPic book series. So these are our books we use a lot of, and it's pictures of different sites across the United States and the world. Maybe the Eiffel Tower is one of the pictures, maybe Elvis Presley is one of the pictures. And again, it's sparking that conversation and that recall of what is this a picture of? Like, what kind of music is this? And maybe someone will start singing, you know? Somebody start dancing even by looking at a picture of Elvis Presley, and that's the purpose of it, is to get people involved. Even if they can't speak and say, we've had a resident just start sort of tapping her feet, you know, when she saw Elvis Presley, because she's relating that to music and enjoying that music. So that's a really cool book that we use quite a lot of. And again, families also have access to all these tools to use when they come and visit. So again, making their visit more meaningful when they're coming, they could sit down and go over some of these MemPic books with the residents or with their loved ones. Another is an online, so there's an online Vcat brain rehabilitation modules that we also utilize a lot, and families can as well. It's a lot of like matching games, there's a lot of pictures with descriptions, famous authors, poets you can talk about that they may have read during their time. So it's a very also interactive online module available as well.
So there's a lot of tools.
There's a lot, yeah.
And you mentioned that families can take part when visiting to make more meaningful visiting experiences for them. Yeah, so during our care plan meetings, where we're introducing that to families to let them know what is available for them to be able to do with their loved one when they visit. So again, it's a more meaningful visit and everyone enjoys it. Thank you. Yeah. And I know everybody's ready for questions. Let me get to them here real quickly. So I think we did cover mild cognitive deficit, but can you just give us a little brief overview again? So this, Sherry? Sure. So mild cognitive deficit, they may still function pretty independently. So it may be sort of hard to notice, right, to the naked eye. But during our Vcat assessment, we're going to be able to find that out. So there may be forgetting some familiar words that are everyday words, or the location of everyday objects. So those are sort of some symptoms or some signs you may notice. Coming up with the right word or names of things, remembering names when introduced to new people. So it's also, you know, very short-term memory is kind of going at that point. So that's kind of the mild stage. Thank you for the question. It was a great question. Next, Ellen is asking, what does sundowning mean? And I know we did touch on it. And so it's literally when the sun is going down, right? So it's literally a time when there's greater anxiety and confusion because it's going from daytime to evening and night, right? So it's a very confusing time because it was light outside, now it's dark. So it's understanding and knowing kind of what kind of comes next, and making sure that they feel safe and secure during that time. And that's the practical application of the Vcat, engage with the MemPic, and just trying to determine what the behavior is telling you. Yeah. And then Sherry is asking about exit seeking. Could you decode that behavior? And some practical, So exit seeking, sometimes you may notice a resident packing everything up in their apartment or where they live. They may have a suitcase, and they're packing it up every night during sundowning time even. That tends to happen. So that's definitely exit seeking. They're ready to go, right? They're ready to go home because, again, why are they here, right? They forgot maybe why they're here. Or we're also seeing a lot of pacing and going towards that door and wanting to go out. So again, that's a time again for Vcat to come in and walk. If you need to walk with them and do the MemPic book, walk with them if they're not sitting down, you know. Let's take a walk, do a lap around outside, get some fresh air even, that's okay. So I think it's just recognizing the signs of that and understanding and making them feel, again, safe, because it's anxious, their anxiety, their feelings for them are real. It's a real feeling. So making sure you acknowledge it is important.
Thank you, that was a great question. I know John has asked about a place we can get copies. I know you talked about some of these assessments. Robin did provide the link to the Vcat.com, so that will be very helpful in getting that information. And then Zan is asking for practical strategies for interacting with folks who are struggling with cognitive issues. Kind of some of the things we discussed with how do you respond to the sundowning, the exit seeking. Is there anything else that we should cover as far as behaviors? And
I mean, I think also some of them can be not wanting you to kind of let you in. So I think sometimes one of the things is refusal of care too. So I think there can be a lot of times that people with some cognitive impairment don't want the care or are resistant to it. Again, because it's scary, they're not sure what that entails. Or it could be also a pride thing, right? They know they're losing some of those functioning and don't want the assistance and the help. So again, what I like to do is, it's a conversation, right? It's sitting down with that resident or that older adult and understanding first what is happening, acknowledging, yeah, I know you're scared right now, you know, but let's look over here. Let's look at this. This isn't scary. This is comfortable. We know this, right? And going over that with them. But again, acknowledging where they're at is really, really important approach, I think, and not trying to just detract from it, but acknowledging that I know you're scared right now, or I know this can be scary, but let's walk through it together.
Yeah. So just validating where they are. Validating their feelings.
Very important.
Yes, I understand you're anxious.
Yeah.
Another question, this is a good question, from Sherry, do you feel that wearing masks has accelerated dementia issues for some people? Probably confusion, right, and anxiety. Yeah,
so I think it's harder for them sometimes to even hear us, right, with the mask. So then that leads to confusion, I'm sure. And even in our memory care in Cohen-Rosen, it's hard to remember to even wear them. So we try our best to do a lot of social distancing, sometimes versus the mask if we can, right? But yes, I do believe mask wearing has led to more confusion, unfortunately.
I can imagine, and plus a lot of older adults do have some hearing loss, so I'm sure that can contribute to. Yes,
so sometimes we do a mic. I know in assisted living, resident council yesterday, I had the mask on, but we used a microphone just to even have that, and maybe we need to do that with more activities even.
Oh, right, amplify. Arthur is asking, this is a great question. Thank you, Arthur. Does Vcat take into account different cultural or educational differences? Right, that is a great question, because I know Mary, our memory care director as well, asked that question, because we do have residents with very different educational and cultural backgrounds, which we need to acknowledge. So right now, so it is a very general assessment right now. However, I think the assessor, right, and the school, when you're scoring it, you need to know those things about the person you're assessing. So I know we have a very thorough assessment tool we use anyways when they move in that shows us their cultural, educational background. So in assessing them and having that score, we at least do take that into consideration. And also, we've had to move people around in groups. So we know they scored a 10, right, out of 21, which is kind of middle ground, moderate cognitive impairment. We may have to move them to the more severe, just because that score wasn't truly, I mean, it was reflective, but it wasn't truly reflective of, like you said, some of those other background things. So there may have to be some moving around between groups, and the score may have to, and the test may have to be done in a week. Say they're having a tough week, you can wait and do or redo it again even. We've had to do that, so. Okay. That's a good point, though. That is a great point, and thank you. And then also doing all that investigation and approaching them, I guess, as a whole will have them, I guess, feel comfortable enough to open up and engage.
Yeah, exactly.
Right. Thank you. That was such a great question.
That's good.
Sarah is asking, I've read about show timing when people tend to cover cognitive impairment in social settings, doctors, offices, etc. Can you speak about this a bit?
So I briefly have heard of that term, but I think I've seen it a lot, right? So I think what we tend to see, at least in Landow and Cohen-Rosen, we see is there's a lot of people that are telling jokes to cover it up, or sort of kind of getting around the issue, right? So they'll be kind of the social, fun-loving ones that can, they sort of just revert to jokes, right? Instead, that kind of diverts from the attention of what's really going on. Maybe they really can't remember what you're asking them, or they can't communicate their answer to you effectively. So they're going to divert and go to what they do know, which is maybe to be funny, or to just laugh, or to kind of be social, if that makes sense. So I'm sort of familiar with the term, but I can say I've seen what you're talking about a lot more, and taking that into consideration. I do think doctors' offices and different places need to know that, because they could do really well at quote unquote hiding some of their cognitive deficits. But you would know that, again, over time. You should know that once you're seeing them more often. But yeah, that's a really good point to bring up.
So these are adaptive strategies that, that they apply when trying to kind of hide what's happening.
Because it can be embarrassing, you know, and no one wants to be embarrassed. So
yeah, you're kind of losing yourself.
Yeah, right.
Wow, that's a great question.
Yeah.
Thank you so much. Wanda is asking, what do you need for families to know when you have a loved one with mild cognitive impairment?
Yeah, so I think that's a good question as well. So I would say, you know, start with mild cognitive impairment. Start researching a lot. You know, I love Alzheimer's Association as well, ALZ.org, but also the Vcat method as well. Really start your researching, right, and gathering your resources, because I think that when in the mild stage, that's kind of the beginning, right? So, and we know it may progressively get worse. Now, the timing of it is different for everyone. I mean, it looks different for everyone. So it's a very individualized process, but start now at least doing that research, and start making sure too, I make sure with a lot of these assessments, doing them to make sure you know where this person is falling on that mild scale, right? So can they still safely do things at home? That'd be my number one to look at.
Right.
Are they able to still drive? You know, safety is where I'd kind of start with, to see, and you can use the Vcat again for that. They have a lot of assessment tools to determine if their safety awareness is still intact as well.
So to piggyback on that, I guess, let's say you are a child and you have noticed a change in your parents' cognition. Do you have any tips for family members on how to address that issue, or speaking to your parents, and then having them transition into residential care setting to help meet their needs, such as Landow House and Golden Rose?
Yeah, so I would say definitely start that discussion with them. You know, and there are going to be good times and good days and bad days, even with the mild. So make sure you're catching them at that moment where it's a good time to start that discussion of, hey, you're going to need some more care in the future. You know, it could be in a week, it could be in months, but we need to start being proactive and talking about it now, because you're seeing some of those signs and symptoms now. So you need to get all your resources together, your support group, right, to help you. So if that is, yes, assisted living, if that's memory care, if it's at that point already, if that's connections, you know, in our assisted living, and see what that looks like and start that journey. I would say even before mild, but if they already have the mild cognitive impairment, to definitely start that and start looking at, again, your whole support group, from the assisted living and memory care and Charles E. Smith to even outside of that, you know, to make sure you have those resources that you're going to need as that adult daughter, adult son, helping your parents too. So if that is different doctors, if that's different agencies out there as well, to get that assistance that you might need.
Thank you. What about maybe for certain things? I know we were talking about behaviors, and we could always talk about practical solutions that we can apply. What about if, you know, a lot of times that you see an older adult with some cognitive impairment maybe lose things a lot? Can you speak to why they're losing things, and then how you can help them?
Yeah, so they're losing things because of obviously their short-term memory, right? So they're losing some things, whether it's their keys, whether it's their wallet, money, little things like that. So I like to, even in assisted living, put a lot of signs. There's a lot of, and we like to laminate those and put those up. So we know, look for your keys over here, you know, if that's where they always put it, they have a dish. and it's a large laminated sign that they can get up and read, oh, and then they can see that that's a cue, right? That's prompting, basically, is what you're doing, to go and look over here. I've also seen a lot of people have some of those tile things on certain devices that goes to their phone so that they can know when something's misplaced, it knows the location of it. Cell phones have that too, but you can put those tiles on really anything. I've seen that happen. But it's a lot of, again, prompting and cueing and prompting and cueing. And also, if there are really, really important items, especially in assisted living, you know, they really only need what they need, right? So if they're not having a car anymore, let's not keep the car keys around. Let's not keep certain things around that they may not even need. So when they do get lost, they won't be frustrated with it because they don't have it. So
that makes a lot of sense.
Common sense, I guess.
We have a question from Wanda, and she's asking, how about legal and estate planning, especially related to advance directives, power of attorney and guardianship? How do you handle consent with adults that are no longer able to make their own decisions?
Make their own decisions, yeah. That's a good question. And again, I'd like to always be proactive with that, right? So even if you have a loved one now that doesn't have any mild cognitive impairment, start that process now when they do, so they can sign that, right? And sign their advance directives. But if we're already seeing mild cognitive impairments or moderate, I would definitely first start with your doctor as well, right? So your doctor's going to need to make that determination because there's some forms they're going to need to fill out to see if they really are impaired, right? So they're going to have to start there. Then there's a lot of elder law attorneys that specialize just in these kinds of things. So they literally can walk you through the process of what to do from start to finish. Because you're going to need to get some courts involved, and you're going to need to have things signed off that way once there's already some cognitive impairment going on, because they're not going to be able to legally sign anymore for themselves, right? So I would definitely start with an elder law attorney for sure.
Do they need anything? And you said they need something from the physician.
Right, and the physician's going to have to find out that they are technically impaired. And your physician may even have those forms readily available. If not, the elder attorney will have those as well.
Okay, great. Thank you so much. I think we're wrapping up. And I really just want to say thank you so much for this insightful discussion. Yeah, it was so much fun. But what if somebody needs the benefit of living at one of our residences?
Yes, come on down. We would love to have you. Come take a tour with us. You know, we would love to show you everything so you can see it live in person. And you can see some of the Vcat programming happening too. It'd be really cool. So definitely call, I think the number.
Yeah, we're going to put it in the
chat. Put it
chat.
up there for you.
Robin will put in the chat the phone number that you can call if you'd love to schedule a tour, or you can even go to our website and check out the information there. And then I also wanted to make sure that you knew that our next Insider, which will be, I think, November the 10th, if I'm not mistaken yet, with Mark Gottlieb of Gottlieb Insurance, and we will be going over the ABCDs of Medicare. And so to register for that event, Robin will also put that link in the chat. And I just want to say thank you to everybody who's joined. Thank you, Anne, for your time. I really had a lot of fun.
Thank you.
And everybody, again, have an amazing day.
Have a great day.
Until next time. Bye.